Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. It is our opportunity to once again talk about the financial needs of the ministry. It is our truth team, but we're going to spend most of our time this hour just kind of looking at issues in the news. This is normally the Millennial Roundtable, so my favorite millennial is right here, Dr. Nick Pitts, who is the vice president at Dallas Baptist University.
Kerby, so great to join you. As always, love being here with you. Is the added treat for the day, and so excited for what the show holds for us.
One of the things that Nick Pitt normally does, and he's normally sitting here, but today we'll just change it around since I've obviously going to be talking about all of this week. We'll bring in Brad Fisk a little bit later in the next hour, but it is an opportunity to look at a number of issues that we always do. But if there's one thing that Nick Pitts always does, it's whatever day. Well, it's Constitution Day, so we've got our constitutional booklet, and I thought maybe for just a minute we talk about the significance of the United States Constitution.
My goodness, this project that we have was embarked upon over 200 years ago, this opportunity for us to recognize our God-given rights of liberty and the ability to be able to come together and have our founders in their great wisdom to be able to craft this document that was going to be able to span over 200 years to protect those God-given rights that we've been given in order that we might have the opportunity to be able to pursue after happiness, however which way this diverse American populace wants to define it. It is a hallmark of this great American experiment, and something that I'm just exceedingly grateful for, and want to be mindful of that on this day, this Constitution Day.
Constitution Day. And let me, for just a minute, since people just take things for granted, one of the things they take for granted is, constitutions are stable institutions. They're stable documents that, and yet if you look at this, I have looked at this in the past, the number of constitutions that have existed, for example, in France since 1789 when ours was implemented, or a number of other states, Italy, since 1789, you can begin to realize that we take for granted a constitution, I just already gave you the date, that has been around for 200 years, and yet is still something that at least some people are still paying attention to, is really a remarkable document indeed.
And, it reminds me, so if we go back to last week, there's certain limits that are placed upon the individuals that represent us in Washington, D.C., as their powers that have been given to them through this shared project. And there was a moment in the Democratic debate last week where Kamala Harris, Senator Harris from California, where she simply just thought that she had an idea of what she wanted to do relative to, I believe it was gun violence that she was wanting to move forward on.
Yeah.
And she just kind of had this kind of a very ominous laugh as she was laughing at her own joke, which is beside the point, where she just kind of was willing to throw away kind of some of the constitutional order and authority that had been given and prescribed to the president if she were to secure that office. And I just thought, it's just wiping away. Like, I understand that there is a problem, but you're only going to multiply the problems if you get rid of the document that really does hold us all together. I'm persuaded by Jonah Goldberg of American Enterprise Institute, his book in Suicide of the West, talking about this great miracle that we have. And out of this miracle, it seems as though it's on its dying days, with the idea of the Constitution being an outdated document, that we have a new day that requires us to have a new set of operating instructions. But for Jonah, there is a piece of it that we fight, but we fight with gratitude, that we recognize the goodness that it is and how it stretched the span of time. And it does protect this God-given freedom that we've been given. And we have to be grateful for it. And a part of gratitude is to remind us of what has come before us. And I think it's just on Constitution Day, it's really important for us to do that.
Well, again, I would give you the assignment to read the Federalist Papers, but I don't know how many would actually do. Sometimes on Martin Luther King Day, I suggest that you read the letter from Birmingham jail, but I think it would be wonderful if you could at least read the Constitution or read Article 1 of the Constitution or something on Constitution Day. So that's kind of my assignment for you. And I might just mention, since we're talking about the Constitution, 2 hours from now, we will have Jeremy Dice in studio with us, and he's going to be talking about some of the religious liberty issues. But one of the things that is really striking is no matter what you think about Donald Trump, one of the things that he has done in terms of maybe upholding the Constitution is putting a fairly significant number of judges into positions on the federal court. Just the other day, we had a historic milestone of 150 federal judges. Now it's up to 152, I think, but 150, I'll just use that number, that have actually been confirmed. 105 to the federal courts, 43 to the circuit courts, and 2, of course, to the Supreme Court. So that's 150. Now, if you might say, well, how does that relate to, say, the previous administration? Well, under Barack Obama at this time, he had about 20 in the circuit court, 43 this time. So you can kind of see that, first of all, Mitch McConnell has been able to move those through. Donald Trump, I would not have predicted that he would have put constitutional conservatives on the court. I feared that when he was elected, he'd probably put his sister on the court.
Or Judge Sheen.
Which would be a disaster, but nevertheless. But because he doesn't really know the issues that well, he pretty much outsourced this to the Federalist Society, to the Heritage Foundation, maybe even a little bit to our friends at First Liberty. And so as a result, I know a number of these people that are now making their way into the federal court or the circuit court, and these are people that actually uphold the Constitution.
And I think one of the great things that he's done with this, and one of the great things that we can take heart in, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, I'm always captivated by Justice Gorsuch, and one of the kind of remarks that he made after he was nominated and then confirmed. He said that a justice shouldn't like every ruling that they have. Like even Justice Scalia, I saw that his son reminded us on Twitter. He's like, it's constitutional but stupid. And so like it goes back to that idea. The judges aren't trying to make laws. They're just simply trying to enforce the laws that are on the books. And regardless of whether you're a conservative or whether you're a progressive, when we have judges that have been appointed to the bench that adhere and enforce the laws that interpret the laws that have been put into place, it gives, regardless of whatever political party you have, the propensity and the power to be able to legislate with who's in power. And that's something that we can take heart in, because that creates a balanced playing field for everybody that's involved.
You know, this issue of immigration illustrates your point. The Washington Times did a survey, and they found that 53 out of 54 judges appointed by Democrat presidents always ruled against Donald Trump. So you knew what they were going to say almost before that ruling came down. By contrast, about half of the Republican judges ruled against him, and about half of them ruled for him. And that's because they were looking at, did they follow the right procedure? Did they follow the Constitution? And, of course, that's very true with the Supreme Court to this day. Those 4 justices, you pretty much know what they're going to do even before the oral arguments. But you're never quite sure with the other 5, because they're looking at it from a constitutional point of view rather than from an ideological point of view.
Yep, completely agree.
We have a lot more to cover, and in particular, the attack on the oil facilities in Saudi Arabia just reminds us the price of oil may be going up, but also reminds us of the fact that we do live in a very dangerous world. Nick Pitt's with me as we will get back into some of these issues in the news right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Recently, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a resolution that declares the National Rifle Association to be a domestic terrorist organization. I wasn't too surprised since I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and often read about similar kinds of resolutions passed by the Berkeley City Council. But this resolution is worth a brief evaluation because it points to a dangerous trend. First, the supervisors attempt to redefine terms according to their leftist lexicon. Even people who strongly disagree with the NRA would have trouble calling it a domestic terrorist organization. Moreover, terrorism is not a viewpoint, it's a terrorist action. Jim Garrity put it this way: being a member of Occupy Wall Street does not make you a terrorist. Being a member of Occupy Wall Street and planning to blow up a bridge makes you a terrorist. Second, the supervisors order city employees to take every reasonable step to limit business interactions with the NRA and its supporters. Does that apply to someone who has a contract with a city who's on the membership roll of the NRA? Jim Garrity wonders if the city would cancel a contract with a company that provides orange traffic cones because someone in the company supported the NRA. Third, the supervisors also urge other cities to follow their example. If they're successful in getting other cities to join them, the NRA might have difficulty scheduling conventions, workshops, and even gun safety seminars in various cities. For those of you that hate the NRA and approve of these actions, let me ask you a question. How would you feel if a conservative city council or board of supervisors labeled the ACLU, CARE, or a number of other groups this way? I think that illustrates what is wrong with this rash decision by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Power, love, and a sound mind, 2 Timothy 1:7, and that's kind of our theme verse for Truth Team. Let me, for just a minute, before we get into some more other issues in the news, mention that during Truth Team is when we take some time to come to you and say we are dependent upon your financial gifts to support this ministry. And so one of the things that we encourage you to do is to visit our website, pointofview.net. As you go there, you'll see that at all sorts of different levels, we want to say thank you for your participation. For example, for a gift, a monthly gift of any size, you'll, of course, receive the Outlook magazine, and that is something that we really want to send to your homes and educate you about those issues. I write for it. Nick Pitts, who's with me today, writes for it, and others will be writing for it as well. But I'm also encouraging some of you to think about supporting it at a higher level. And so one of the things that we've done over the last couple of years here is actually created another level, which is called the Liberty Club level. And you will receive these little booklets. Those of you watching online can see I'm holding up some having to do with Make Your Vote Count and capitalism and socialism, social media. Just a few minutes ago, I held up the one on constitutional interpretation. And so we will send those booklets to you on a regular basis. Every single month, you'll receive the Outlook magazine. You'll also receive those booklets. And also, as a thank you, we'll send, and Nick, you got to say, this looks pretty good. This is a Yeti tumbler.
That looks pretty good. I bet that keeps either a drink pretty cold or pretty hot.
Pretty cold or pretty hot. And again, that's for your gift of $50 or more monthly. And again, a 20-ounce tumbler keeps hot or cold beverages. And it's just one of those ways in which we can say thank you. And then if you want to see what those booklets look like, what the Tumblr looks like, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. And then I might also mention that at the Century Club level, we add all of that. So that's the Outlooks, magazines, that's all the booklets, that's the Yeti. And then I'll hold this up real quickly. And this is something we'll talk about more in the next hour, the Life Essentials Bible, which, first of all, takes 1,500 different principles from the scriptures and applies those. Gene Getz has really dedicated his life to doing that. And so you can read that in the Bible itself. But we recognize that some of you might have a little bit of technological sophistication, as does Nick have, and it has a QR code. And every one of those principles has a QR code. So there are 250 hours of videos that are associated with this. And Nick, one of the things we found is that for our older listeners, they say, I don't really know how to use that. Well, they can just have the Bible.
Yeah.
But if they have any technological sophistication, they can then watch 250 hours. That's like a seminary education, right?
I was about to say that takes a whole nother, that takes the idea of the living and active Word of God to a whole nother level.
I would say
with
so.
With those videos.
And that's for your gift of $100 or more. And yesterday we had somebody call in and say, well, I will give you $1,000. We said, how about you make it $1,200 and then you'll get the Bible too? And for those of you that are maybe technologically limited, I've said before, well, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to know all that. Just get your son, your daughter, your grandson, your granddaughter, and they can help you with that as well. And so if you have not already joined with us, let me, in addition to saying that we have all of that on our website, pointofview.net, we have, Nick, let's announce today a match of $11,000.
Hey, yo, that's awesome.
So that means, again, your gift, for example, of $50 a month becomes $100 a month, or over an entire year, $600 becomes $1,200. If you decided to give $100 a month, that becomes $200 a month. So I really want to encourage you to do one of two things. Either go to our website, pointofview.net, and click on that button, or you can call our pledge line. We do have some people ready to take a phone call. 800-347-5151, 1-800-347-5151. And let's, for just a minute, before we get into some of the issues in the news, hear what some of our listeners have said about the importance of point of view.
Point of View Truth Team.
And in the absence of resources like Point of View and the silencing of the church, I think it would in effect create the silencing of the church. And this is why, again, it is so essential that that forums like Point of View and the work that you and Kerby are doing is so vital to the work of the church. And this is where listeners can be an active participant in spreading the gospel of the kingdom by supporting Point of View.
Without programs like Point of View, Ministries and Works would not have a forum that reaches the populations that need to hear the truth about the very important issues that America is founded on. So often we take what we hear for granted, the radio program or the wonderful personalities, but you know, they can only be on if people like you and me support them.
Clearly, I think that we are operating in a culture that is at every turn seeing the media and Hollywood push an agenda on them, and you folks present the truth. And not only do you present the truth, you present it in a gracious way that helps people to understand the facts.
Point of View Truth Team.
So again, we encourage your phone calls, 800-347-5151, or you can simply go to the website, pointofview.net. Dr. Nick Pitt's in studio with us. Okay, Nick, let's get into some of the issues. We did not talk about this yesterday. We should have, but, you know, there are just so many other things on the news. But here, what we had is a drone attack on an oil facility in Saudi Arabia. It's the largest oil processing plant in the world. And so what it has done is cut off about 5% of the world's oil supply. It's about 5.7 million barrels per day. Oil prices spiked. And the president, to his credit, said, if need be, I have authorized the release of oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So here, in one fell swoop, a tremendous emphasis again and a reminder the fact that we live in a very dangerous world.
Yeah, so there's a couple of angles that we can take from this. One, I think we can be cognizant of the fact that there is domestic implications in this globalized world that we live in today, that simply a strike on oil storage tanks has the propensity to be able to disrupt what we do at Kmart or Walmart, et cetera, at our local gas pump. So we need to be cognizant of that and the implications that could have, especially in this kind of tenuous time as we're potentially moving our way into a recession. But there's also the larger piece that's going on to this as well, as what we consider about what's happening with our ongoing shadow war with Iran that we're fighting right now.
That's where I was going to go next, yeah.
And it does raise questions as to what are the next steps, and I guess really probably the bigger question that begs to be, that needs to be asked is, what is our intention relative to Iran? What are we trying to get out of this?
Well, and again, let's factor in one other thing, because I read the daily briefing, and I know you were talking the other day about John Bolton.
Oh, my goodness,
Now, here we go. Now, John Bolton was more of a hawk. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
I think he'd agree with that.
Yeah. I think he'd caw at that.
Yeah. So that is the case. And so his exit, have some people say, well, that was good because we then won't be drawn into a proxy war. The others that were more the hawks saying, see, I told you he was right. You know, here we find Iran involved. And if indeed they are the culprit, it does kind of raise some fundamental questions about policy and what's next, and whether or not we should have had a policy towards Iran that was like Barack Obama, which had a treaty, or the policy that has been sort of semi-implemented by Donald Trump, or the policy that might have been implemented by John Bolton. So I see three different options. What do you see?
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of pieces to this. One, I just finished up Call Sign Chaos, which is General Jim Mattis's new book. I want to give honor where honor is due. And one of the areas that he talks about is that where President Trump has been similar in a certain regard to Iran that President Obama was, in the sense that when Iran disrupted I believe it was a drone when some of their some of their military shot down one of our drones in the Strait over in that airway. President Obama did not engage with them, nor did he retaliate against Iran.
He said it could have been a mistake.
Yeah. And with President Trump right now, it seems as though there's been a hesitancy to be able to engage with Iran. Now, granted, it's a very precarious situation right now, and the last thing that we want to do is to make to make a move without understanding our intention with what we're trying to actually get accomplished with this. But we can say that the situation with Iran is going to continue to grow increasingly more precarious, and it's going to require us to take some pretty significant action if we want to be able to see any remnant of peace in that particular area.
As you might imagine, Nick Pitts and I have a lot more to say about this in terms of how this is going to play out in the next couple of months. But certainly we need to, just before we take a break, give you that opportunity to join with us. And so as we're at a break, this would be a perfect time to give us a call, 800-347-5151. And your pledge would be greatly appreciated. And don't forget that because we have a match, that means your actual pledge is doubled. And so we encourage you to give us a call, 800-347-5151, or visit pointofview.net.
When I turn on the news, there are days I wonder what's happened to our nation. So many things seem to be turned on their head. It makes you wonder, what can be done about it? Then I remember how Jesus talked about the power of truth and how it can set people free. We know the truth, and when it's spoken in love, it has the power to bring healing to our divided world. 2 Timothy reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Is it possible in our day and age to once again see civil debate, common sense, and national unity? It seems very clear from 2 Timothy that we are to be bold, not fearful, to appreciate God's power to do good, and to demonstrate to the world His truth and love. But to communicate this to a broken world, they need you to join our team. Join the Truth Team. Your monthly support has the power to turn our nation back to real truth. Join the Truth Team today at pointofview.net/team or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net/team or 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this. 'Cause
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Continue our conversation today with Nick Pitts as we talk about this attack on the Saudi oil supply and the Saudi Oil Processing Center. And we're going to, again, talk about a lot of the different ways in which this could affect you and your family. But most importantly, I think it just illustrates, again, why you need to consider what you can do to support Point of View. Tell me how many other places you'll hear the kind of, and again, I know this is sort of patting us on the back a little bit, but still, the intelligent conversation about this. I have sitting next to me an individual that understands some of the foreign policy issues. I studied foreign policy under people like Gene Kirkpatrick at Georgetown and others. You just read General Mattis's book. We're looking at some of these strategic things. I'm going to be quoting in just a minute from Frank Gaffney of the Center for Security Policy. We're going to be quoting from some other individuals. And that's just one more reason that I hope that you'll consider what you can do to support Point of View. And again, you can go to the website, pointofview.net. And, of course, also the pledge line, 800-347-5151. And I would encourage you to make that phone call or click on that website. And, again, $11,000 match. We'll talk more about that in the next hour. But, Nick, we've got two issues. You talked about Iran. What's our relationship with Iran? The previous president actually wanted to have a treaty, and it was a bad deal, and so Donald Trump pulled back.
Yep.
So now what do we do with Iran? I want to also add one other issue, Saudi Arabia. I can remember a time when Marlon Maddox, who was the original host of this show, and I were interviewing some people, and this is decades ago, and we were saying, why are we so close to Saudi Arabia? And that expert at the time said, well, because Saudi Arabia owns a lot of our stock.
Yeah.
And they have even threatened to the previous president, selling off the stock or selling off their treasuries. And so because of that, and because we were so dependent on their oil, we oftentimes turned a blind eye to some of the things the Saudi princes would do. This time, I'm getting the sense the president's going, we're, not that bothered by it. We'll just open up some of the oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Here's one expert that said, the loss of Saudi production can be absorbed by the United States, and actually other countries should be grateful that we are close to energy independence so it doesn't affect us the way it did back in the 1970s. Since I'm the old guy around the table, I remember when we had the oil embargo in the 1970s.
Oh, my goodness, I can't.
And you couldn't even maybe drive a car.
I can't fathom, and I'll just be young for a second, and I'm going to say, I cannot fathom the oil embargo, and to read about it, and the idea of literally miles long lines
That's
to
true.
be able to get
That's true.
fights breaking out, gunfire happening at gas stations.
You got it.
That is that blows my, that's just it's unfathomable.
Well,
to
this is
my
the
mind.
Millennial Roundtable, so I want you fellow millennials to say, oh, my goodness, it really was that bad?
I mean, I get to fight when I have to walk inside because the credit card thing doesn't work. But nevertheless, it does point to, though, the reality of the matter is that we are increasingly more interconnected around the world today.
Yes.
And so there is a sense that we do that, and this goes back to strategically, not every hill is worth fighting on.
No.
So it was tragic what happened with Jamal Khashoggi, who is the Washington Post editor, Washington Post writer, and Saudi Arabia. There was something going on there, and so what do we, the United States, who is the champion of human rights, to do in that moment? Well, you've also got to know that operating in the background is another battle that we might have to step on and step up to at this particular point. Well, it's less about the human rights right now. Well, I guess you can make an argument it is about human rights, but there's also the situation that's happening with Iran right now. And so now we're having to think through that this is a much more complicated issue, and there's a variety of hills. And how do we can't stand on every hill. We can't fight on every hill.
Nope.
And so what are the issues that we need to press forward on? And so when we think about Saudi Arabia, they're a friend of the U.S. to a certain degree. And then how do we synergize that friendship in such a way, if there is, because I know some would say that they're no friend of the U.S., but I would contend that they're a friend of the U.S. How do we synergize that relationship to address the problem, which is Iran? But then from the Christian perspective, though, Kerby, it's important for us to delineate that the reality is Iran is in the middle of a great awakening. There's a huge revival that's happening right now in Iran.
More people becoming Christian in Iran than any other country by percentage.
There is a huge revival happening in Iran right now. So yes, politically, from a geopolitical standpoint, they are our enemies. But from a Christian perspective, we love what's happening over there. And so how do we protect what's happening from over there from being squelched by these enemy forces with the supreme leaders and that council? But how do we also address the geopolitical threat that they're increasingly becoming?
Add one more factor. I don't want to get too complex. Israel, they're having an election today.
They're having an election today.
And if Netanyahu is no longer the prime minister, that changes some of the dynamic too. So all of this fits together, and this is why it's important to really pay attention to what we're talking about here on Point of View, because you're probably not going to get this kind of analysis, certainly not from a Christian point of view, from MSNBC, are you?
Now, so let's think about Iran for a second. Let's continue to drill down there. What their relationship is to who is our strongest ally in the world, Israel. Yeah. They have literally said death. They chant death to America, and they want to push Israel into the sea. Very clear on their intentions. I don't know about you, but as an American, I don't like the idea of people chanting in the middle of the streets that they'd like my death, they'd like my demise. As an American, I don't like the idea of someone wanting to push my enemy into the sea, or push my ally into the sea. Yeah. And so they are a threat to us that we need to be cognizant of. But how do we address that threat? Well, it will be increasingly interesting to see how this president continues to move forward when it appears as though the sanctions are working against Iran right now, that's causing them to be very desperate in some of their gestures that they have toward the U.S. and then also just toward the world as well.
Let me add one more, and then, of course, we'll get to the really big story, supposedly, New York Times and Brett Kavanaugh. But since we are primarily broadcasting today to people in Texas, this relates both to Texas as to the federal government. And that is, Frank Gaffney's been on this program before, and he said, in a matter of minutes, Saudi Arabia lost half of its oil-producing capacity from an attack with Iran, and it was simply a drone attack. And the point he's making is that it illustrates only so well not only their vulnerability, but our vulnerability. And he points out that President Trump, again, let's give credit where credit is due, back in March, issued an executive order requiring federal agencies to assess and fix the vulnerabilities of our electronic grid. Now, this is where the Texas part comes in. Even though it's been slow to get the federal government to pay attention, we have had various experts on this program here who are in the state of Texas, in the Texas Senate, who are trying to assess the vulnerabilities in the state of Texas. And I suspect that it's quite possible that we might have a fix in Texas before we have a fix in the federal government, because he then points out that one of the people in Homeland Security says, the danger of an electromagnetic pulse, the danger of taking down our electric grid is overestimated. And Frank Gaffney says, want to bet? Think of Saudi Arabia. So this should also be a wake-up call to not only Texas, which is trying to solve this problem right now through the Texas Senate, but for the federal government, because it shows just one drone attack took out half of the oil production facilities in Saudi Arabia.
So it's almost like we have to hold two things in tension, two ideas in tension right now. There is the comparative advantage idea of believing it to be true that international trade is going to decrease. It's going to decrease prices and products and services that are being provided that will inevitably, that have often allowed innovation to be able to occur. That's a good thing for us. So we need to be good trade partners with entities and individuals all across the world. It's going to decrease those prices. That's a beautiful thing, so that we don't necessarily have individuals that are making widgets anymore, but machines that are making the widgets, and individuals that are making the machines that make the widgets, which are more jobs. That's a beautiful thing. But in this increasingly globalized world, it's important for us to be able to be self-sustaining. So should something significant happen to us, that we're able to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Like, we're Texas, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
So we need to cultivate those relationships across the world, but also recognize that we have to protect our own homeland as well. We have to be a self-sustaining, not necessarily self-sustaining entity, but be an entity that's prepared in this very globalized world for understanding how attacks can come at us and how there are certain entities that very much view us as a threat. And so how do we protect the homeland as need be?
And just the other day, we had Dennis Prager sitting in that chair, and he was reminding us, as we all have said, whether you're Jewish as he is or Christians as we are, we live in a very dangerous world, and we have to understand that. So if nothing else, as we go to a break here, let me just ask you, ladies and gentlemen, where did you hear this kind of conversation, except on Point of View? And that's because we have a very smart guy sitting across from me, Nick Pitts, and an individual that has done some research. And so I think that as you go to a break right now, this is a great opportunity for you to click on the button that says pointofview.net, or you can simply go to our website, pointofview.net, or call 800-347-5151. Say, I want to be part of the Truth Team, and there'll be somebody there who'll be glad to talk with you and explain the way in which you can get involved. Let's take a break. We'll cover some more stories right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. This is the third in a series of episodes exploring the impact of the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. In this episode, we turn to the issue of hostility toward religion. It's clear that the justices wish to respect the presence of the memorial and what it has come to mean for the people of Bladensburg, Maryland. Though opponents of the memorial clamored for neutrality, removing the Peace Cross would not be a neutral act by the government. As the majority explained, quote, requiring their removal would not be viewed by many as a neutral act, unquote, and it would be seen by many as profoundly disrespectful. Worse, the court's majority observed, a campaign to obliterate items with religious associations may evidence hostility to religion even if those religious associations are no longer in the forefront. In our next episode, we will look at that last part and the evolution of this particular religious symbol into what it means today, but don't miss this critical point. The justices of the Supreme Court are communicating to the nation that genuine neutrality toward religion means respecting religiously expressive monuments, symbols, and practices, not destroying, altering, or hiding them. As Justice Alito explained in his majority opinion, a government that roams the land, tearing down monuments with religious symbolism and scrubbing away any reference to the divine will strike many as aggressively hostile to religion. Stay tuned for more. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Back once again. We encourage you to join with us on the Truth Team. And again, we have a match on the table. So that means your gift of $50 a month could be $100 a month to this ministry. So we certainly encourage you to join with us at maybe the Liberty Club level, the Century Club level. And if you're just joining us, let me just mention that the way in which you can find out more about that is simply going to the website, pointofview.net. Click on that button that says Join the Team, and you can recognize that for $50 a month, you will not only receive the Outlook magazine, but these various booklets that we send out, as well as this attractive tumbler, we like to say, a Yeti tumbler, which will keep your hot drinks hot, your cold drinks cold. And for even a higher level, we add to that this very extensive Life Essentials Bible. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But, Nick, I did not want the hour to go by without getting into something that causes me to shake my head in a way that I would have never imagined before. I sometimes make jokes about the New York Times because sometimes their stories haven't always been accurate. But I always say, this appeared in the New York Times, which means it must be true. But more and more, I have to say that with a sense of facetiousness because the New York Times, in this particular case, first of all, I printed some of these allegations against now sitting Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, and in a sense took one flimsy, uncorroborated story and added to it another flimsy, uncorroborated story. And this, for those of us that came to trust the journalistic integrity of the New York Times, is just beyond the pale.
Well, I don't even know where to begin. It's almost like we're in the Twilight Zone. Because here's where our listeners know that I come from a kind of a more progressive background, is where I was raised in. So there's just a sense of wanting to give the benefit of the doubt, just because that's been inculcated inside my spirit. And plus, I'm of the persuasion that I want to look for the best. And so I know that there are certain media entities that are very that have an agenda, and it's very frustrating because they refuse to. They just frame stories, and I think certain stories are false, and so. But I don't want to put everybody into the same bin. One of the frustrating things that I get, though, is what makes it really hard to defend them is in instances like this where they omit a key detail of this Kavanaugh story, of not only yes, there was individuals now that are coming out and saying that it happened, but then consider what the woman that's at the very center of this, the actual victim, the supposed victim of this, doesn't recall it, one, and then her friends, two, say that she doesn't think that it happened. And so we're just getting and it's just completely left out of the story. And then they go down, they double down on it, so they issue the correction. But now I'm finding out, I just saw this tweet that came out, Molly Hemingway, that's just done a phenomenal job of reporting on this. Now we're coming out, and so the New York Times reporters told an NPR show last night. They went on, and they said that the editors of the newspaper were to blame for the failure to include the most important detail in the story, announcing a supposedly new misconduct allegation against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. That key detail was that the alleged victim had never made a claim against Kavanaugh and had told several friends she could recall no such incident as described by the reporters. Even though they have been shamed, as they should be, they've been shamed for this journalistic malfeasance for the past 2 days. Then they go last night, they go down and they still refuse to admit it. So it's not even an editor's thing. It's just a you thing. Like, acknowledge the error
mistake,
and then move forward from it. But yet we're not seeing that, which is just increasingly discouraging.
And what we have seen in the past, again, as the old guy around the table, is that there have been individuals at the New York Times and at the Washington Post, which are the two most respected papers, that sometimes had reporters that made things up, or reporters that did not report part of a story, and they were summarily fired. Mm-hmm. And that's what gave them the credibility to say that even when we have been misled by one of our reporters, we've done the right thing. Now, look at what is happening with the editors who are still not willing to admit that they left out key details. these are some of the same editors maybe that fired some of those guys in the past. Am I right?
So I like the quote that continues to come into my mind when I think about some of the journalistic malpractice that's happening by certain mainstream media entities is so you have S. Scott Fitzgerald says, reserving judgment is a matter of infinite hope. And it is becoming increasingly harder to reserve judgment. Especially when these errors are so blatant. It's so blatant. And then to include that key detail in the correction, like I'm not a journalist by any stretch of the imagination, not classically trained in the least bit, but even I understand that's a key piece. That's a key piece that you want to have included in the main body and should not be something that, through the New York Times no less, there are good writers and there are good reporters that are doing work at the New York Times. But there are these type of reporters that are just doing reporters and editors that are just doing an atrocious job and need to own up to their mistakes.
And again, I've been making the case for why people switch the point of view. First of all, an intelligent conversation about what's happened in the Middle East. This one, the fact that you can't even trust the New York Times, that it's bad enough that you bury this very essential detail on the bottom of the story. It's even worse when you don't even have it in the story.
Yes. and again, like this is one of the reasons why I'm so grateful for shows like Point of View. It's one, there's the key part, which is one, it's telling you the fullness of the story. And it has an added credibility, and it's an institutional entity that has some weightiness behind it, which I think is just it's a differentiating factor in the market today. It's one thing for a guy with a Twitter account to be hounding somebody about some problem with the story. It's another thing for another institution to say, no, this isn't the fullness of the story, or you're omitting a key point of the story that really is essential to it. And so there's the institutional credibility of it, one. Two, there's the competence piece of it, which I think is just so essential. These aren't individuals at Point of View, Kerby being the head of this, aren't just simply just guys that have, or individuals that are just are reading on the internet all day. There's credibility behind it. He's been classically trained in a lot of this. And so I think there's that piece to it. And then three, I know that I'm biased. I'm biased like CNN and Fox News. Nevertheless, there's the reality that we have a Christian conviction to it. And today there's a understanding that Christ is over all things, that he is before all things, and he holds all things together. And as Abraham Kuyper said, there's not one square inch over the whole human existence over which God does not say mine. How do we identify the divine footprint in this entire entity known as Earth? And one of the beautiful things that Kerby does oh so well is to be able to integrate with competence the news of the day, but also to have the character to be able to address this from a Christian perspective, which just makes Point of View so significant.
Thank you for that wonderful comment. And it is interesting to even see some of these Democrats running for president, even after they knew that it was
coming
false.
Out from impeachment. It reminds me of, and this is where I'm just the crazy one of it. I'm going to bring my millennial spin to it. There's a movie called Zoolander, and
I know exactly where you're going with this.
And then there's Mugatu, who's played by Will Ferrell as a comedian, and he's got this crazy look on and mask on, and their camera eventually pans to him at this moment of pandemonium. He says, "Am I taking crazy pills?" And it feels like I'm taking crazy pills right now.
Well, we have a lot more to cover, and we're going to keep Nick here for the next hour. And so if you would like to join with us, and I hope that you would, we need you to join the Truth Team. And so as we take this break, it's a long enough break now that you can make that phone call. And I'm looking into the window there, and all sorts of people have gathered around to take those phone calls. So let's now encourage you to make those phone calls. It is 800-347-5151 to join with the Truth Team. And of course, if you are on your computer, just simply go to pointofview.net, click on Join the Team, and you can find out more as well. 1-800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled. So give us a call. We'll be back right after this.
This week, we're celebrating the power of one. The power each one of us has to help change our world. The power to carry the love of Christ and his truth to a hurting world. The power to restore hearts and minds across the nation. Throughout the week, you'll hear from ordinary people just like you. You'll hear them tell about what they've done, how they've gotten involved, how they've helped to restore truth in our culture. You have the power to change lives. You have the power to carry truth to every corner of our nation. And with the help of a special ministry friend, that power is going to be doubled. Join the Truth Team today and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. If you join today with a monthly gift, each gift you give will be matched dollar for dollar for an entire year. Give online by going to pointofview.net and click on the Truth Team banner, or call us at 1-800-347-5151. We're standing by to take your call now, so call 1-800-347-5151 or go online to pointofview.net and join the team.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. This is our Millennial Roundtable. Nick Pitt's with me, but I'm sitting in the chair here because it's part of our Truth Team. It is Constitution Day. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the next hour because Jeremy Dice will be with us. We'll talk about the Constitution, talk about some of these appointments, talk about some things happening in religious liberty. So all of that is certainly front and center. But I thought that since we have Nick Pitts with us today, I wanted to get some of his perspective on an event that we should have talked about yesterday but did not. And that is the drone attack on the oil facility in Saudi Arabia. That was the largest oil-producing plant in the world. Oil prices spiked. Probably 5% of the world's oil supply was affected instantaneously, which caused President Donald Trump to actually authorize the release from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve so that it won't affect our prices quite so much. But I think it, first of all, Nick, illustrates that this kind of oil shock in the past would have been greater than it is, but it also reminds us that we do still have lots of tension in the Middle East.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis has the line, don't judge a man by where he is, judge him how far he's come. And so if we look back to how far that we have come from a self-sustaining standpoint, it's encouraging to be able to see that we can withstand such an attack, especially in light of the fact that there's a significant portion of Americans that simply cannot afford a price jump at the pump. So 23% of Americans are living with credit card debt just simply to pay for essentials such as food and shelter, etc. But it also helps us to better understand, from even though it's far away right now, the threat that Iran is from a geopolitical standpoint. They are a country that is feeling the pressure of economic sanctions that have been placed upon them because of their just atrocious actions that they have done. And now Their desperation breeds risk, and they are individuals that are doing very risky, desperate things right now.
And here's a good example of where we can apply, first of all, some intelligence, which hopefully we will do and are doing, but our Christian convictions, because in Iran, as we've talked about with other guests, you are seeing a really dramatic revival taking place.
Yeah.
The number of Muslims or people that have grown around the Muslim world, some of them are not all that dedicated. They just live in that country where that is the dominant religion, that have become Christians, has been significant. So it isn't like all of the country is our enemy. It's these ayatollahs and some of those that are driving this in a way that is not necessarily received well by the people in Iran, and certainly is something that if we could support them, maybe eventually there could be an overthrow of those individuals.
Within the Christian, there should be a level of nuance when we think about Iran. Yes, they are the country that has chanting in the streets of death to America. Yes, they are the country that has openly declared that they'd like to abolish Israel, that they want to push Israel into the sea. And yes, they're the country that continues to stir up so much strife and turmoil in the Middle East and around the world. But they are, like you said, also the country that there is a great revival happening there right now, that the leadership within Iran is exercising tyrannical rule that is squelching the spirit, the human spirit there. But yet, what we know to be true, that you can strike us, but you cannot defeat us from the biblical narrative. And what we're seeing is a powerful move of the spirit. And what would happen if we were able to defeat and we were able to see the Iran leadership move from aside? It would be something beautiful.
Speaking of leadership, I'll just mention in passing, but we'll come back to this, election right now in Israel. And, Benjamin Netanyahu still be the prime minister. So those are the kinds of things we pay attention to every single day. Nick Pitt's in studio with us today. He is the vice president at Dallas Baptist University, and, of course, the regular host here on our Tuesday Millennial Roundtable. But they let me sit here today because I'm kind of running all week here with our Truth Team. And as we always have when we do Truth Team, our good friend Brad Fisk with us as well.
Good afternoon. Good to be here. Good to be with you guys. And good to be doing great radio, talking about the events of the day, events of the week. And that's what we do here at Point of View. We do that. That's our bread and butter.
And again, one of the reasons we wanted to cover some of these stories is that they are in the news, and we wanted to give you a Christian perspective. And Brad, that's one of the reasons why I encourage people to support Point of View, because you're not going to hear some of this conversation with the nuance that we just mentioned a minute ago, with a Christian perspective, and understanding that there are a lot of events happening simultaneously that affect your faith, your family, your freedom, your economy, and those kinds of things. And at the same time, we are certainly dependent upon our listeners to support this ministry, and that's one of the reasons we do Truth Team.
That's right. You know, we've been doing this program for well over 40 years, and there is a legacy here that is so important to maintain, to grow, to support. Why? Well, because the news isn't going to stop whether we're funded or not. That's not going to change the world as far as things will be happening, things we need to know about. And so we're asking you to give. And right now, every dollar you give, Kerby, is going to be matched up to $11,000 today. This is today.
So today.
So what a wonderful way. That means if you give that $50 a month pledge, that becomes $100. That single gift of $300 becomes $600, just like that. So we're asking you to really just pray and see what God would have you do at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. You can also, we got you all set up on the web. Go to pointofview.net. You'll be on and off the computer in about 2.5 minutes.
And again, I would encourage you to go to that website, because you'll find out more about the fact that if you join at the Liberty Club level, you receive these booklets that we have been making available. They come to your mailbox every single month, along with the Outlook. And, of course, also, we were talking about this attractive-looking Yeti tumbler, and Nick has been enjoying that as well.
You mean coveting it?
Yes.
Coveting
well,
it.
I'm going to give him one. He gets one
No.
for sure before we're done here. And I might just also give you a program note that just a few minutes, we're going to really feature our friends in the military, because we have somebody that is the executive director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation. So this would be a day we'd really love to hear from some of you in the military, because we always like to honor you and we're going to talk about PTSD and a variety of other issues. Just talked about what's happened in the Middle East. Later on, Jeremy Dice will be with us. We'll be talking about various issues of the Constitution, since it's Constitution Day.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that takes place on a regular basis, but we do take a little bit of time out, in just a short amount of time, to talk about the way in which you can actually help this ministry. And we are hoping that every one of you will participate. We're not looking for any certain dollar amount. We're just looking for universal participation.
That's right. Yeah, it really is important to understand the amounts between you and the Lord. But what's really important to understand is this: why should you give? Why should you give now? And I'll tell you, because there is a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe, not the least of which elections.
Yes.
Haven't talked about that at all this week
No,
yet.
we will.
And all of that's tied up with that. So you can help us stay strong where we really need to be strong by giving us a call right now. 800-347-5151. Let's have 5 of you check in right now during this break. 800-347-5151.
And, of course, the website is pointofview.net. And I would encourage you to go there. You can see the various levels in which you can participate in our theme verse, which, of course, is Power, Love, and a Sound Mind, 2 Timothy 1:7. Again, 800-347-5151. Let's get those phones ringing. And, again, the website, pointofview.net. We'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Recently, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a resolution that declares the National Rifle Association to be a domestic terrorist organization. I wasn't too surprised, since I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and often read about similar kinds of resolutions passed by the Berkeley City Council. But this resolution is worth a brief evaluation because it points to a dangerous trend. First, the supervisors attempt to redefine terms according to their leftist lexicon. Even people who strongly disagree with the NRA would have trouble calling it a domestic terrorist organization. Moreover, terrorism is not a viewpoint, it's a terrorist action. Jim Garrity put it this way: being a member of Occupy Wall Street does not make you a terrorist. Being a member of Occupy Wall Street and planning to blow up a bridge makes you a terrorist. Second, the supervisors order city employees to take every reasonable step to limit business interactions with the NRA and its supporters. Does that apply to someone who has a contract with a city who is on the membership roll of the NRA? Jim Garrity wonders if the city would cancel a contract with a company that provides orange traffic cones because someone in the company supported the NRA. Third, the supervisors also urge other cities to follow their example. If they're successful in getting other cities to join them, the NRA might have difficulty scheduling conventions, workshops, and even gun safety seminars in various cities. For those of you that hate the NRA and approve of these actions, let me ask you a question. How would you feel if a conservative city council or board of supervisors labeled the ACLU, CARE, or a number of other groups this way? I think that illustrates what is wrong with this rash decision by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
Point of View Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Back once again, we're in the midst of our Truth Team. And again, we have in studio with us Brad Fisk and Nick Pitts. And just before we introduce our guest, and this is a top opportunity again to feature those of you in the military and talk about some excellent ministry to them. I think there are probably a few people, Brad, that are saying, okay, you mentioned a match. Explain what that is exactly.
Well, a friend of the ministry, happened yesterday actually, made a gift to the ministry saying, here's $11,000, and you can have that $11,000 if you match it dollar for dollar with listeners calling in their gift. And that's it. That's all it's about. It's just a match challenge, which means any monthly gift, let's say you give $50 a month. Well, that's $600 for the year. So we get to count the whole year in the match, which means that $600 becomes $1,200, just like that. So I just want to give you the vision of a strategic giving opportunity to give us a call right now at 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151. You can also go on the website while you're listening to the interview at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
Let's go to our next guest, and that is Jeremy Stallnecker, Executive Director of the Mighty Oaks Foundation, and we have information about him and the ministry there as well. Individual that served in the Marine Corps, and I'll certainly have him share a little bit more about that. And one of the things that we have wanted to do, Nick and Brad, over the years is really feature those people that have served in the armed forces.
Absolutely.
But we've also recognized, as we've done programs on PTSD and a variety of other things, the real need. And so Jeremy has not only served in the Marine Corps, but has been an assistant pastor, a senior pastor. But the Mighty Oaks Warrior Journey is really about kind of peer-based programs, instruction, camaraderie, team-building activities. And so, Jeremy, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to talk to you guys.
I would imagine that most of our listeners are not familiar with the Mighty Oaks Foundation, which is one of the reasons we brought you on and one of the reasons we bring lots of guests on. So can you give us a little bit of the genesis behind this? You bring into this your own experience in the military as well as ministry experience. How does that all come together?
Sure. So the Mighty Oaks Foundation, we serve veterans, active duty service members, first responders, now working with the first responder community as well, and spouses, so we try to work with the families as well, many of whom are dealing with trauma related to military service or service in their community for the first responders. Many of them, you know, as we've come through 20 years of war, dealing with combat trauma or traumas related to that. And so we've had the opportunity to minister to thousands of folks struggling with the things that, you know, we look at and people talk about, and post-traumatic stress disorder, and all these things. But we approach it from a non-clinical, faith-based position, which really means we believe that God is the creator, that he has a plan for our lives, and that regardless of what we've been through in life, if we'll align to that plan, those things in our past no longer have a hold on us. So there is order, there is direction, there is purpose, there is hope. And God's given us a great open door and opportunity to communicate that. And it's been an incredible journey. We have 2,800 graduates of the week-long program that we have at various places across the country. We'll bring folks to one of our locations, and then thousands of folks we speak to at an event-by-event type of basis through churches and active duty units will put on events that will speak as well on spiritual resiliency. So it's interesting. It's very different than the approach that many would take. Chad Robichaux, our founder, served in Afghanistan, did 8 combat tours as a Marine, came home, dealt with post-traumatic stress and all the things that we talk about, found hope through a Christian man who mentored him in biblical manhood, really, how to be the man that God created him to be. And he took that and decided he'd pay it forward with his family. They started the Mighty Oaks Foundation in 2011, and we've been going forward ever since. And so the peer-to-peer part that you mentioned is really very, very important to what we do. So many folks refuse to get help because they believe that no one understands where they've been or what they've done. And in our organization, everyone who serves with us, who teaches, who leads teams, and whatever it is that they're involved in, they all have the same military experience, and many of the life issues and traumas they've had to overcome as well. So, it's been an incredible journey. We're thankful for what God allows us to do.
Well, let's talk about some of the threats. We talk about 22 suicides and those kinds of things. We talk about carry the load. It does seem to me that we certainly will never say thank you enough to those of you that have served in the military, but we really do need to reach out to them and provide hope and help, don't we?
That's right. There are, we're told that the number has adjusted a little bit. The most recent report that the VA put out is just under 21 a day, which isn't a major adjustment, but just under 21 service members or former service members, veterans a day take their life, which when you put that in perspective, just about every hour someone who served our country is ending their life. And there are a lot of reasons tied to that. Also, that report lets us know that almost 4 active duty service members every day are taking their lives. So we're looking at just an incredible epidemic. And it's been said, and it's so, that if this were anywhere else, this would be an epidemic that would stop the wheels of government and cause a lot of resources to focus. And really, in a lot of ways, that hasn't happened. Very good people have tried to deal with this and are trying to deal with it. But yes, we all have a responsibility. I'll say from my perspective, having served in the Marine Corps, I struggled with some things, but had a great foundation of faith that allowed me to work through that. But part of that for me was kind of walking away from that service. I did that. I'm happy about that. I moved on. 10 years later, through a series of events that we don't have time to share today, I came to realize personally that service does not end when you hang your uniform back up in your closet. Mm-hmm. We need to continue to serve one another. And as thankful as I am for so many folks who are working to deal with these issues, really it's veterans who have understood the path forward, reaching back and helping those who have served. To me, that's the answer going forward.
Jeremy will be with us in the next segment, but just before we take a break, Brad, I wanted to first of all say that this is just one illustration of why we certainly like to take some time to feature people in the military, first responders and others. We see, now he's saying 21 suicides a day. Well, yeah, it's gone from 22 to 21. I mean, just unbelievable. As well as, carry the load and all the other ministries and wounded warriors and on and on and on. And so, if nothing else, as we go to a break, I really want to hear from our military service members today, because if you've listened to this program, we certainly honor you, and we also want to make sure that we minister to you, and that's one of the reasons we brought this particular program to you in this hour, because it's so absolutely essential that we reach out to them with the love of Jesus Christ.
Let me ask our listeners, guys, a question. You haven't served in the military directly, but you have benefited. And how supportive are you of the military? How supportive are you of programs like Point of View that bring you the information that you're not going to hear elsewhere, especially the depth of information like you're hearing right now? You can help us right now with every dollar being doubled at 800-347-5151. Looking in the phone room, we have 6 lines open right now for you, so you won't have to wait at all. 800-347-5151. Very simply, do you support the military and what they do for us every day? Yes or no? Please help us.
And again, we are encouraging your involvement. And as we've said before, we know you don't give to get, but we might mention that there are all sorts of tremendous benefits. The booklets that we send to those of you that give $50 a month, the Yeti tumbler, as well as the Outlook magazine.
You said Yeti?
Yeti.
The top brand. That's the top brand. Wow. Sorry.
That's pretty good.
Look at that. I just
look
love
at Nick.
it.
Nick's ready for his Yeti. He wants to walk off with it.
I know. We similar to the Yeti, it's the top brand. We're trying to provide analysis, and we're trying to provide content that's excellent. And so why not let that go down to the gifts that we even give as well?
And again, we also, for those of you at the top level, which we have not talked about yet, also have a Life Essentials Bible. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but I just wanted to, once again, take some time, especially since we're talking with Jeremy. We'll come back and find out a little bit more about how you can support that organization, or how you could have one of their speakers come to find you and to maybe address some of those topics. And that's just a good example, Brad, of the fact that we're exposing our listeners to all sorts of vital ministries and all sorts of information they would not know if they weren't listening to Point of View.
That's right. And again, for that to continue, we need your help. 800-347-5151. Looking for 6 calls right now to fill the lines up as we come up on a break. 800-347-5151. Every dollar you give, whether it be a single gift or a monthly gift, is doubled. And you can also do that on pointofview.net.
And let me again encourage you to make that phone call right now, because this is when we have a little bit longer break for the news and information. So if you are saying, well, I would like to call, but I don't want to miss the good content, well, this is the perfect time to call. 800-347-5151. Might even encourage some of you that have never donated before. Give us a call. We need at least a few more calls, so call us right now.
When I turn on the news, there are days I wonder what's happened to our nation. So many things seem to be turned on their head. It makes you wonder, what can be done about it? Then I remember how Jesus talked about the power of truth and how it can set people free. We know the truth, and when it's spoken in love, it has the power to bring healing to our divided world. 2 Timothy reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Is it possible in our day and age to once again see civil debate, common sense, and national unity? It seems very clear from 2 Timothy that we are to be bold, not fearful, to appreciate God's power to do good, and to demonstrate to the world His truth and love. But to communicate this to a broken world, they need you to join our team. Join the Truth Team. Your monthly support has the power to turn our nation back to real truth. Join the Truth Team today at pointofview.net/team or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net/team or 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, it is the midst of our Truth Team Week, and we have in studio with us Nick Pitts and Brad Fisk. And in just a minute, we're going to go back to Jeremy Stolnecker. And I might just mention Chad Robichaux was supposed to be with us. He is one of the founders. We'll talk about some of the speakers in just a minute. But how we doing? We certainly are not only wanting to feature this incredible ministry that I think is something so needed for those that serve in the military and are first responders, but we also are in the midst of asking people to support this ministry.
Well, we have a new member of the Truth Team checking in from Oakwood, Texas. Thank you for that gift of $50 a month. I did a little math. We have an $11,000 match, so that $600 becomes $1,200.
Right.
Okay, so if 17 more people, just 17 more people would give at that level, we would have the match of $11,000 cleared up. Guys, I don't want to leave any of that money on the table.
No.
We by the top of this hour, we need to hear from you, and every dollar you give will be matched dollar for dollar.
So let's, if we can, just for a few more minutes, Jeremy, chat with you. I mentioned Chad. I know you and Chad and even your wives are speakers, but there are a number of other speakers as well. You're located in California, and certainly we have a number of radio stations in California that could go to your facility. But you also have programs that can go to other states, and you have speakers that can go there as well. So talk about what would be available. Since we broadcast in 42 different states, I know some people are saying, well, I don't live in California, so I'm glad there's a ministry, but it can't help me. Well, yes, it can it?
Sure. We are headquartered in Southern California. We have what we call our national training centers, our offices, and some of the training facilities that we use. But our programs are week-long programs where we will bring folks to spend a week with us and work through these things. We're actually in 4 states. We're up in Northern California, so not where our office is, but in Northern California. We have a place in Texas, a place in Ohio, and a place in Virginia. So geographically, we kind of regionally cover the country. But part of what we do is because of faithful donors like those that you have there, we're able to pay for not only the program for those that attend our program, but for travel. So wherever a person is in the country, when they apply on our website to attend one of our programs, there will be no cost to them. We'll get them from wherever they are to where they need to be to attend the program. So that's one aspect of it. We really are a national organization, and we minister nationally. But in terms of our speakers, yes, Chad speaks, I speak, our wives will speak on various subjects related to military service or just life and trauma and moving forward. But many of the folks who have attended our programs, they have deep military backgrounds and incredible experiences, a relationship with Christ, and they are very, very good at telling their story and really telling their story, but pointing to God in their lives. And we'll speak at, as I mentioned before, these resiliency events for the military, church groups, churches, other organizations, really whatever it is that someone needs to hear from folks who have served about how to continue to serve those who are currently serving or coming along. We'd be happy to facilitate that, and that's just as easy as going to our website and filling out a form.
And again, we have the link to the website there, mightyoaksprograms.org. And one of the questions I think many people have, you have a section here, who may attend, and current member of the military, spouse, or veteran who struggles with reintegration. And so talk about who can attend and how long that program is. And you already, of course, mentioned that they can go to the website and find out a little bit more, but fill us in with some of the details.
Yeah, who can attend? Really, it's anyone who served in the military, is serving in the military, is married to someone who's serving in the military, or is a first responder married to someone who is a first responder. And that first responder field is pretty broad, of course. But really, it's our goal to serve those who have served or are serving. We realize that includes the family as well. So if you fall into that category, which again is a pretty big category, please go to our website, fill out an application. We have this year, 28 weeks of programming. We'll have about 800 students come through one of those programs. So we have space for you. If you'll apply, we'll find the best place and the best time and make that happen.
So again, one of the things that we encourage people to do is simply go to the website. And I know we were going to have Chad on. We'll maybe get him on in the future. And Jeremy, I appreciate you giving us some time today. But we're in the midst of our truth team. So this is one of the reasons why we wanted to feature you today, so that people would know more about your organization. And we'll come back to it again, especially as we begin to see some of the ways in which you've been able to reach out to even some of our listeners here on Point of View. So I appreciate you joining us today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for what you guys do.
We're going to, just before we take a break, talk about the fact that we're still in the midst of our truth team. And that was just one of the interviews that we're going to be bringing this week. We're going to have a chance to hear from a lot of different people, Brad. And, of course, we still have Nick Pitts in studio with us as well. And, Nick, this is just something to recognize, because I know you even have veterans that come to you at Dallas Baptist University, and there are sometimes some really significant needs that can really only be met with the power of the gospel. I mean, we can provide financial support and maybe even emotional support, but sometimes it's the spiritual issue that's so key.
And a part of it is just understanding that it's out there right now. I think we're living in a world in which there's just only so many things that are being broadcast right now. It seems like we're in a very politically obsessed news cycle, where if it's not related to President Trump by 1 degree or 2 degrees of separation, then we're just not hearing about it. In reality, though, there are a lot of things that are happening right now that beg to be reported on, as well as better understood. And I think that's one of the characteristics that differentiates Point of View from others, is that they're reporting and they're revealing some of the needs that are percolating across the U.S. right now, from our veterans, because we know we have veterans that are all across the U.S. right now, to some of the difficulties that they're facing when they fought for our country, and now they're fighting in our country right now. But really, the fight they're fighting now is just trying to navigate through a world that's not on the battlefield anymore.
You know, and he said something in passing. I know you will agree, because you write about these kind of things in the daily briefing. If you had any particular identifiable group that was committing suicide at a rate of 21 a day, I mean, just look at the kind of publicity which is rightly being given right now with opioid overdoses, suicides among millennials, and even Christian leaders and things like that. If you had any identifiable group other than the military committing suicide, 21 suicides a day, I think this would be a major health crisis.
And then it's important. So 21 does not sound like a lot, but then you have to remember what's the population of our military is around 2 million people. That's a significant chunk of our military that are dying because they were willing to lay down their life for our country, and now are trying to figure out something is the matter. And so how can we provide resources? How can we come alongside them? Because one of the aspects of what we know to be true about the biblical narrative is that the scriptures are littered with individuals that struggled greatly with what David Foster Wallace would call that deep bruise inside of individuals. Mm-hmm. And this is the Jeremiahs of the world that were lamenting. You've got the Ezekiels of the world that were just crying out. So I think the biblical narrative can speak to that, but I also think that this is an issue that needs to be spoken about. And I think that's one of the multiple good things that happens because of Point of View.
You know, one of the themes running through this week, Brad, as you well know, is we're trying to highlight individuals making a difference. And here, Chad and Jeremy, who I just mentioned, both of those individuals, we had a chance to hear from one of them, said, you know, I had a hurt in my heart. I didn't know what to do with it. So instead of just focusing on my own needs, I recognized that this was a ministry I could develop. And our focus has always been that your gift will help impact the culture, but also as you give to this ministry, we are helping you make an impact in your culture as well.
We are indeed. And I'm going to turn the corner for a minute, okay? Let me just do that and ask you guys both a question that's, I think, very, very important. We have an election coming up. Now, there's been no decisions. We don't know which way everything's blowing and going because we got a ways before it actually happens. But I feel there's a need for funding for Point of View bigger than we've ever had before. But I'd like you guys to comment just shortly, and maybe we can carry over to the next segment.
Are we talking about Sean Spicer and on Dancing with the Stars? Is that the vote we're talking about?
No. We're talking about this little thing called a presidential election coming up in a bit.
That's Sean Spicer. No, that's not him. That's not him. The one. Okay.
We invited this millennial in here anyway.
There we go.
But as you well know, we're going to have to gear up for all sorts of news, information, and everything. We even talked about having some special features and how people are to vote and all that kind of stuff. You've seen the little booklet, Making Our Vote Count. Well, this is just the beginning of what we're going to be doing.
Yeah, the biblical narrative is very clear. We are called to love our God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And one of the beautiful ways to love your neighbor is to be able to engage the political arena through the act of voting. But also what we know to be true, that if we look back on the 2016 election, around 92% of the election coverage was negative towards President Trump. Now, was some of that merited? Yeah. But then there was 92%? No. And so it's important for us to have a better array of the news stories that's actually coming out.
And you can help us build that war chest right now at 800-347-5151. The lines are wide open right now. So we're inviting you to come with your dollars doubled. That's right. Every dollar you give up to $11,000 will be doubled. 800-347-5151. It is a critical time.
And again, we said every dollar doubled, but let's also, again, give you that number, 800-347-5151. A lot of people waiting for your phone call, 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled. We'll be right back.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. This is the third in a series of episodes exploring the impact of the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. In this episode, we turn to the issue of hostility toward religion. It's clear that the justices wish to respect the presence of the memorial and what it has come to mean for the people of Bladensburg, Maryland. Though opponents of the memorial clamored for neutrality, removing the Peace Cross would not be a neutral act by the government. As the majority explained, quote, requiring their removal would not be viewed by many as a neutral act, unquote, and it would be seen by many as profoundly disrespectful. Worse, the court's majority observed, a campaign to obliterate items with religious associations may evidence hostility to religion even if those religious associations are no longer in the forefront. In our next episode, we will look at that last part and the evolution of this particular religious symbol into what it means today, but don't miss this critical point. The justices of the Supreme Court are communicating to the nation that genuine neutrality toward religion means respecting religiously expressive monuments, symbols, and practices, not destroying, altering, or hiding them. As Justice Alito explained in his majority opinion, a government that roams the land, tearing down monuments with religious symbolism and scrubbing away any reference to the divine will strike many as aggressively hostile to religion. Stay tuned for more. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Back once again, Truth Team. And Nick Pitt's with me for a few more minutes. And, of course, Brad will be with us for the next hour as well as Jeremy Dice joins us. But, you know, Nick, Brad brought up a good point. We are going to be going into a really horrendous presidential election. And the reason I say that is I've been watching the story about Brett Kavanaugh.
My goodness.
Here you have a flimsy, uncorroborated story in the New Yorker, which is bad enough. But then you have the New York Times, the paper of record, giving another flimsy, uncorroborated story about Brett Kavanaugh, about something that supposedly happened when he was a college student at Yale, which the woman that he supposedly did that with has never said happened, and that never shows up in the story.
Yeah, it showed up in the correction that they offered now, and then they went on last night. They went on, I think it was NPR or some other PBS local station up in New York, and then they refused to be able to acknowledge it yet again. They overlooked it again. It's just another reminder that if you have hesitation to be able to trust what's being broadcast and reported as news, they're giving merit to that hesitation that you have. And because of that, you're probably left wondering, well, who can I trust? As we come into the 2020 election, we know that there are many individuals, according to the research. There's about 46% of evangelicals right now that are still undecided as to who they're going to vote for or whether they are going to vote.
Yes.
And we know that there's power in information, power to, one, compel you to vote, and power to compel you who to vote for in that particular election. Now, I think that the case is very clear from a biblical standpoint that there's a need to be able to vote. I think it's one of the best ways to systemically love your neighbor is to elect individuals into office that are going to provide systems that are just and equitable. But then it also raises the question then of how do you act shrewdly enough to be able to cast your ballot for the wise decision as to who would be the best candidate. And that's where I think point of view comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Point of view is that entity that's going to give you the information necessary to make a prudent decision, a biblical decision, to help you better understand the issues of the day from the biblical perspective. You're not going to get that from the New York Times. You're not going to get that from the Washington Post. You're not going to get that from the Wall Street Journal. You're going to get that in one place, and that place is point of view.
One other one I thought I'd put on the table here is just the craziness, because you have at least three of the presidential candidates on the Democratic side that called for the immediate impeachment of Brett Kavanaugh. Of course, they've been calling for the impeachment of the President of the United States, even when I think they knew that the story was wrong.
Yeah.
And so after a while, it's like you said, who do I trust? And these are the same people telling us that we're going to have Medicare for all, we're going to have the Green New Deal, we're going to have guaranteed income, we're going to give everybody $1,000 a month in perpetuity. I don't even know where they're going to think that money's going to come from.
Yeah, I think it comes from the future, right? So it comes from the future, but
From
in the
you
present,
millennials.
yeah. You're welcome. We're just going to invent something. I don't know.
Well, it's really important, guys. I think that we look at this because, as you said a moment ago so well, point of view is on the spear point, the point of the spear, and it's so important for our friends who support the ministry to continue to do so, because we are gearing up for a battle, and it's going to be gigantic. I'm sure of that. So here's what happens. We are $10,350 away from having that $11,000 match cleared up. We have 5 minutes to get that cleared up. We don't want any of this money to go away. $10,350 to go. So a few people, you know what? If 17 people would join at the $50 a month level, the Truth Team, receive the free gifts, and give. You don't have to have the money now in hand. It's a pledge for the future. We would be there. We'd make the goal. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. You can also give at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
And again, some of you might say, well, $50 a month, maybe I can't do that, but maybe I could do $20 a month.
Sure.
Or maybe I could just give a $100 gift, just a one-time gift.
It's all doubled.
All is doubled. So again, I want you to decide what level you're going to join us at. But at the same time, we recognize that some people can give at the higher levels. And so that's why we've provided a Liberty Club level, which is $50 a month. Century Club level at $100 a month. But whatever you can do, we're looking for 100% participation.
We are indeed.
And we're not worried about the amount, because as you participate, then all of that takes care of itself.
That's right. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151.
So let's, if we can, maybe come and hear what some of our listeners have said about Point of View.
Point of View Truth Team.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm 23 years old, and I used to be very involved in politics on the way radical far left, which, as you were saying, has views that are mainstream among Democrats today. When I got the Holy Ghost, the Lord opened my eyes to many truths, mainly the general moral decline of the country, which I used to advocate for before God changed my heart and mind. So, and when Christ found me, I started to focus on God's kingdom, but I still have major concerns about what happens in this country politically. And I just want to say thank you to your radio program, because it's really refreshing and appreciated. And thank you to God as well.
The thing that Point of View does is that they have looked at culture, they analyze it, and then they put it through the lens of the Christian perspective. And so that in and of itself is so rare. It is very biblical to do what you're doing.
Thank you to Point of View, opening my eyes over the last several years to so many different people that I follow now that I used to never follow. So thank you for opening up the truth.
I want to just tell you, I love your show. I listen every day. It's fantastic, the stuff that y'all bring out that other news shows and other people don't.
Point of View Truth Team.
And again, just a good example of opening the doors. You've heard some say, you opened my eyes to some things that I did not know. Some said, you've opened the door for me to know about some of these organizations. Just a few minutes ago, we talked about the Mighty Oaks Foundation. I doubt any of you even had ever heard of that organization, but now you know there's another opportunity to minister to those veterans and first responders. And Nick, I was just thinking about opening our eyes to what's going on in the Middle East. You and I have had some conversation here over the last almost 2 hours now, in which we've talked about some of the things that are happening in Iran. We have an election in Israel. We have a tenuous relationship with Saudi Arabia, and those are the kinds of things we talk about on Point of View.
We're all when certain media entities aren't going to cover the entirety of the news, it creates a need. And I like to think that Point of View, I know that Point of View is being able to fill that need. Mm-hmm. They're talking about issues, everything from the new research that's coming out that indicates that 67% of Christians, churchgoers, would say that you can walk with God alone. Well, what does that speak to the loneliness in our culture? Then there are the geopolitical issues of what's happening in Iran right now, the elections that are happening in Israel, to what's happening with Justice Kavanaugh. We're covering a whole gamut of issues because we see that there's a need that's being not being met right now, and we believe it to be true that for Christians, it's our choice and our chance to be able to fill that need for the glory of God and for the good of this world.
And again, I hope that not only do we hear from some of you that are in the military, but millennials, because next Tuesday you're going to be here. You have Chelsea, you got Kat Armstrong. You're going to be hitting that as hard as you possibly can. So I want to hear, Brad, right now from some of the people that normally listen to the Millennial Roundtable and get a chance to hear Nick Pitts.
Absolutely.
Really talk
or
about
you support the military, like we talked about earlier in the hour. 800-347-5151. There's room for you in the phone bank right now, barely. 800-347-5151. There's two lines open at 800-347-5151. You can always give online
at pointofview.net. Nick, I want to thank you for being with us. And next hour, we're going to talk about the Constitution. It's Constitution Day with Jeremy Dice. Again, 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled.
This week, we're celebrating the power of one. The power each one of us has to help change our world. The power to carry the love of Christ and His truth to a hurting world. The power to restore hearts and minds across the nation. Throughout the week, you'll hear from ordinary people just like you. You'll hear them tell about what they've done, how they've gotten involved, how they've helped to restore truth in our culture. You have the power to change lives. You have the power to carry truth to every corner of our nation. And with the help of a special ministry friend, that power is going to be doubled. Join the Truth Team today and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. If you join today with a monthly gift, each gift you give will be matched dollar for dollar for an entire year. Give online by going to pointofview.net and click on the Truth Team banner, or call us at 1-800-347-5151. We're standing by to take your call now, so call 1-800-347-5151 or go online to pointofview.net and join the team.
Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kerby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. We are in the midst of our Truth Team, but we might just, again, in case you've just joined us, give you a little bit of an update on where we are. First of all, we have a match on the table. We'll explain more about that in just a minute. But we also are going to spend some time talking about the Constitution, because today is Constitution Day. So it seemed like a great opportunity to bring Jeremy Dice, who's been on the program with us many times before with First Liberty. And we, of course, have lots of things to put on the table. But first of all, let me go back to Brad Fisk, because anybody that's just now joining us, we have an $11,000 match on the table.
We do.
Which means if you want to support Point of View, you can call 800-347-5151 or go to pointofview.net. And that means that your gift of any size, a one-time gift, a monthly gift, whatever it might be, will be doubled dollar for dollar.
Right. It's an $11,000 match today. We've chipped away at it nicely. Thank you for those calls. But we are nowhere near close to having this done. And we are down to basically 55 minutes to get this match cleared up. So we're asking you to be as generous as you can when you call. Why? Because we're listener-supported. A lot of people don't know that. That we are listener-supported Christian radio. 800-347-5151. Come on. Every dollar doubled. 800-347-5151. We're asking you to give your very best gift, $50 monthly. We'll talk about all the details of that in a little bit. But in the meantime, go to the phone. Won't you? 800-347-5151 or online at pointofview.net.
Jeremy Dice, of course, Senior Counsel at First Liberty. And today is Constitution Day. And, first of all, Jeremy, let me talk about the endurance of the U.S. Constitution. Because we have a situation in which, if you look at other countries, they've had multiple constitutions since 1789, France, Italy, others. We take for granted, in some respects, that we have had this Constitution for more than 200 years. As a matter of fact, we're putting more and more justices on the various federal courts that actually want to interpret it. But we maybe take that for granted, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. And the very fact that we take for granted the fact we came from a country that did not have a written constitution, and what it actually meant to the founders to actually put something in writing to ensure that the rights that were given to us by God were articulated in written form so that we would have a standard by which to order our lives and to order our government by, not just so that we would order our lives, but more importantly, that we would restrain the government that was necessary to be able to order society as a whole. And so today is a good day to just set aside, take a look at your pocket constitution. If you don't have one, Point of View will send you one, I'm sure, for a donation of any amount or maybe nothing at all. Who knows what they'll do for you.
Yes.
You could probably even find it on Google if you had to. But if you need to, go to my Twitter page today at Jeremy Dice, twitter.com/Jeremy Dice. I just put up the preamble. If you could at least just get through the preamble on Twitter today.
The people.
And by the way, it just takes 2 posts on Twitter to get through the entire preamble, so it doesn't take a whole lot. Go through and just reread the preamble and remind ourselves with those great first little words of our Constitution, we the people. And remind yourself that you and I are the kings, the princes, and the potentates of this actual country, not those we put into power.
And I might just mention that we do have Jeremy's website there, his Facebook page, and all of that. And also we have one of his articles, which he wrote a while back, Trump and Religious Liberty. But just as we talk about the Constitution, you said something in passing I just got to pick up on, because I believe the previous president had some concerns about the negative liberties in the Constitution. But that's what it was intended. It wasn't to give the positive stuff or all the free giveaways. It was to recognize that if indeed you believe that human beings are sinful and that ambitious people are probably going to go into office, what you need to do is constrain the government, and that's why the Constitution is written the way it is.
Yeah,
True?
Justice Scalia used to say the line that he'd rather have a stamp on his desk that says stupid but constitutional, because we can have all kinds of laws. They can still be stupid but still constitutional, and we try to interpret, or at least there's a notion out there to try to interpret the Constitution to validate all kinds of stupid behavior. It doesn't need to be validated. It's stupid. But look, the Constitution, to go back to a more serious point for you, Kerby, is if you've heard me talk about the Constitution at any length at all, I always talk about the fact that there are two different parts to this Constitution, the amendments and the actual physical body of the Constitution itself. Mm-hmm. And that's a very, very important distinction between those two parts. Because as it starts off with we the people, and we go on to articulate the powers that are enumerated to the government itself, the legislature is going to be two different bodies, and they're going to have responsibilities. The House can lay taxes and be the power of the purse strings. The Senate is more collegial in talking about things. It has the Article 3 courts that are in there. It has the executive that's in there. And they all have specific responsibilities that you and I as individuals really can't do. I can't lay in a Navy. My neighbor doesn't like that in my pool in the backyard. I can't lay in taxes because that's stealing from you. So we need to have some sort of centralized government to do that. And so we give up some of the rights that we have in order to form this more perfect union. But right at the end of the main part of the Constitution, there's just this awkward stop, and it just ends. And the very next words are, Congress shall make no law.
Yes.
And it goes on through the First Amendment, the Second, Third, and all the way on down to all these amendments that say we did not give up these rights. These remain with us. We did not give them to you, government. You may not take them from us. And just to be clear, as it gets down to the 10th Amendment, in case we forgot anything, all the rights that were not specifically enumerated within this Constitution, it says, are reserved to the states and then to the people. And I love that residual clause at the very end of that. It's like someone took the broom and the dustpan at the end and kind of swept all the rights back up into it and said, no, you guys didn't get any of these. These belong to us. God didn't give them to you, government. He gave them to us. We have lent a certain amount of those responsibilities and rights to you in order to provide for this common defense, the welfare, the general welfare that we talk about within the preamble. That's why it's important for you to go and look at what the preamble says, to know what the purpose statement is for our Constitution so that you know what we're supposed to be doing as the rulers of this country.
Wasn't that great teaching, Brad? If nothing else, I can think of all sorts of people that I would love to hear that, incling maybe some members of Congress. I'd like to have a chance to hear that.
I was thinking the exact same thing, thinking we got to get you on some big platforms here. Point of view is great, but on national news, standing next to President Trump and saying, here's what the Constitution really says.
Well, look, I thank you for that, and it's very flattering to hear all that, and I appreciate it. But here's the reality, is that our founding fathers, who were very intelligent men, wrote this document so that the people would understand it. And it doesn't take much for us to understand it, but it does take you some time to read it. And it doesn't take a whole lot of time. It's much shorter than War and Peace, and many of you have already read that. So certainly you can get through this and the various amendments to the Constitution in one very simple setting. I mean, it's not the book of Jude, but it's something pretty close, right? I mean, you might have to get into the length of maybe the book of Revelation at the best, but it's a pretty short document. It's easily understood, and it was designed so that not only the elite of the founding fathers, but the farmers and the housewives of our colonial era would be able to read and understand and then apply the principles of the Constitution.
Yes, absolutely.
So 2 action items. Action item number 1 is to read the Constitution, or at least Jeremy's preamble of the Constitution. Sure. Action item number 2, as we come into a break, we need to hear from you. We have a match on the table here.
We do.
And again, that is an opportunity for you to join through the Truth Team. It could be a one-time gift, $100. It could be $50 a month. It could be $20 a month. We'll let you decide, and we'll talk about some of the benefits after the break. But let's just encourage you to go right now, because there are people that can explain that. If you call 800-347-5151. We need to clear this up, don't we?
Every dollar doubled, whether it be a single gift, a monthly gift, right now. 800-347-5151. That's 800-347-5151, or on pointofview.net.
Every dollar doubled. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Recently, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors passed a resolution that declares the National Rifle Association to be a domestic terrorist organization. I wasn't too surprised since I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and often read about similar kinds of resolutions passed by the Berkeley City Council. But this resolution is worth a brief evaluation because it points to a dangerous trend. First, the supervisors attempt to redefine terms according to their leftist lexicon. Even people who strongly disagree with the NRA would have trouble calling it a domestic terrorist organization. Moreover, terrorism is not a viewpoint, it's a terrorist action. Jim Garrity put it this way: being a member of Occupy Wall Street does not make you a terrorist. Being a member of Occupy Wall Street and planning to blow up a bridge makes you a terrorist. Second, the supervisors order city employees to take every reasonable step to limit business interactions with the NRA and its supporters. Does that apply to someone who has a contract with a city who is on the membership roll of the NRA? Jim Garrity wonders if the city would cancel a contract with a company that provides orange traffic cones because someone in the company supported the NRA. Third, the supervisors also urge other cities to follow their example. If they're successful in getting other cities to join them, the NRA might have difficulty scheduling conventions, workshops, and even gun safety seminars in various cities. For those of you that hate the NRA and approve of these actions, let me ask you a question. How would you feel if a conservative city council or board of supervisors labeled the ACLU, CARE, or a number of other groups this way? I think that illustrates what is wrong with this rash decision by the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kerby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/antisemitism. Viewpoints.info/antisemitism.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Midst of Truth Team right now, and we have in studio with us Jeremy Dice, and I might just mention we have posted his article. We've posted it before. We posted it here again. It was in First Things, Trump and Religious Liberty. It came out in May, and we'll talk about what he said there and all the things that have happened since then. But Brad, first of all, we are in the midst of our Truth Team week. We're in the midst of an $11,000 match. You're doing the best to try to give us a little bit of an update. We've got some people on the phones. Matter of fact, I think most of them are on the phone, but I still think there's an open line, so we are encouraging people to call 800-347-5151.
I just got records of some gifts that came in.
Okay.
A veteran who'd heard our veteran segment wanted to give to Point of View that we did a little bit ago, and we've got another friend here who supersized their gift. They gave $25, called back to do another $25 per month. To join the club.
That'd be perfect.
So thank you for that. And then we have another friend here who said this is the greatest radio program ever. Take it. I love
That's
it.
Pretty good.
Thank you very much.
And since you mentioned $50 a month, and we're talking about Liberty, we do have a Liberty Club, which says that you will receive the Outlook magazine, which we send out every month, but these booklets we send out as well. I just mentioned the one there on constitutional interpretation, making your vote count, capitalism and socialism, social media,
great.
whatever. And then Jeremy's going to get a kick out of this. We're going to give him one of these, the attractive Point of View tumbler by Yeti. So these are pretty nice looking.
Here, okay.
And those are all for $50 a month. And I might just mention real quickly, we haven't done much about this, but we, for the $100 a month, add the Life Essentials Study Bible.
Awesome resource.
Which has 1,500 different principles, biblical principles that then apply to our lives. Gene Getz has done this over the years. But then if you are looking real carefully for us online, you see this is one of those QR codes. There's a QR code in the Bible at each one of those sections, and there's a video, 250 hours of video that go with this. So if you're just kind of low tech, you have the Bible, but it has 1,500 different principles applied to our life, which is something we try to do on Point of View every day. But then if you have any kind of tech background, or if you know a son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, they can probably do the QR code, and that is a way that you can have access to 250 hours of videos, which is like a seminary education. So those are just some things we make available because we want to say thank you for your gift.
Just a quick update on the match. We are $9,500 to go, and it'll be cleared up, and we got till the top of the hour to get it done. So if you haven't taken some time, please do it. 800-347-5151.
Well, on Constitution Day, we had to have Jeremy Dice back in studio here. First things, Trump and religious liberty. You wrote this back in May. Of course, that's before you knew a few other things. But even then, you were pointing out that this is a president who actually was promoting free speech and religious liberty. Talk about that.
Well, he was and is, and thankfully he's been doing that since the beginning of his presidency, perhaps even before he ran for office, or while he was running for office, I should say, before he got into office. But this is a president that, within the first 100 days of office, put this executive order together on religious liberty, free speech and religious liberty. And that set in motion a series of events that were just fantastic. And not only did it orient the entire administration towards protecting religious liberty, effectively setting off a chain of events that would say, hey, we are going to prioritize religious liberty where it has not been prioritized before. It set as a matter of policy within the administration the importance of religious liberty above many others. And that's very historic, for one thing. It's very important for another, because what came out of that was in General Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, if you remember back in the first year of his administration, he wrote a memo to all the executive agencies about where the protections for religious liberty are in the law already. And so what you have here is a couple of different principles taking place. One is the elevation of the First Amendment again, and the principle of the government saying we're going to defend and restore religious liberty throughout our administration. But they did that without passing another law. In other words, they didn't have to go to Congress to do this. The court or the administration simply recognized that there are a lot of laws on the books right now that defend religious liberty. Let's just defend them rather than question them, that the previous administration had already done. And so they started removing some administrative rules that were interfering with that defense of religious liberty. And that started to have the perfect effect of alleviating the burdens on religious liberty, or to put it positively, defending and balancing religious liberty appropriately throughout the administration. And then it started adopting new administrative rules itself that would further define and defend religious liberty within the different agencies. And just last month, the Department of Labor took another stab at this, and they decided to expand the contracting provision, saying, look, there's a lot of different case law out there right now from the Supreme Court that says we can't discriminate on the basis of someone's religion when it comes to contracting. So we're going to allow organizations to be fully religious. They don't have to change who they are. They don't have to water down what they believe. They don't have to hire specific people or not hire specific people. They don't have to compromise their beliefs in doing that. They can simply be who they are and be on equal terms with those that are competing for federal contracts. That's a massive step forward for religious organizations to be put on equal playing field with all the other organizations that are out there. As a matter of fact, just yesterday we filed comments with the Department of Labor saying that this is a good thing. The comment period
just ended, right.
That's right.
Yeah. And you filed it, and so there we go.
That's right. So First Liberty Institute filed that on behalf of a lot of different organizations, pastors and whatnot, to say, look, we're thankful for this change, and it's a very important change for it to continue to go forward. In fact, I just sent that to another organization just as an FYI. Hey, I know you're thinking through these things as well. I want you to be aware of it as well, and how it might affect not just you, but people who work around kind of your orbit of what you do. So the bottom line, whether it's through that article or other things, the administration has done a lot of stuff within the current realm of the law to defend and restore religious liberty. There'd be one other thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, but we just got done arguing before the Supreme Court of the United States on behalf of a veterans memorial outside of Washington, D.C., old one, 95 years old. Well, the Department of Justice actually joined with us to argue. We shared time with President Trump's administration on our side this time,
great.
arguing in defense of that Veterans Memorial. So that's just one more sea change that has occurred through this administration and its commitment, undogged commitment. They have not changed this since the beginning to defending and restoring religious liberty, just like what our mission at First Liberty is.
And Brad, I might just mention you're from Colorado, and of course you know who Jack Phillips is, and here's another good example, because remember Jack Phillips won, and now this is about two artists in Arizona that were actually defended as well. So you can begin to see that whether it's the Jack Phillips case of Masterpiece Cake, or whether it's the Bladensburg Memorial, or some of these others, these almost have, Jeremy, kind of almost like a falling dominoes, and now the dominoes are falling towards religious liberty rather than away from it, right?
Yeah, and especially the courts are setting up a barrier a bit to say, we're going to defend people from hostility towards their religion, which is equally important. You can't have religious freedom in a society that is hostile towards religious beliefs. So in the American Legion case, the court said, look, we're not going to knock this memorial down. That would send a very bad message that there's a government prowling around the country, knocking down religious symbols anywhere they find them. That's awful. That's what they do in other countries that are much less concerned about religious freedom. Well, the same thing is the case here with these these non-discrimination ordinances. So whether it's the nib shop there in Arizona, or the Telescope Media that just won at the Eighth Circuit, another case just like that, Jack Phillips, Aaron and Melissa Klein, our clients, all these are saying, look, wait a minute, hey, we're all about equality and all these things, but we can't have, quote, equality on all these issues if it means showing hostility to people of faith. And that's a really important issue. And what I'm especially encouraged by, just to go back to that article from First Things, is that the Department of Justice is coming out on the side of making sure there is no hostility towards religion in these cases.
That's awesome.
That, again, is a departure from prior administrations.
That is so awesome. You know, right now is an opportunity to continue to allow us to bring voices and stories like that to our airwaves when you support us. It's Truth Team Week. We're asking for your help financially to just continue doing what we're doing and do it bigger and better. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. We just took a peek. The phones are wide open. Every line is available, so you can call in, and you'll be in and out of the telephone in any time short here. Pointofview.net is where you catch us on the website, pointofview.net. Or again, you can call us, Kerby, 800-347-5151. Every dollar is doubled that you give, whether it be a monthly gift of whatever amount or a single gift.
You know, all week we're going to be talking about winning, and we've talked about a lot of the winning. But when we come back from the break, I want to ask Jeremy, what's at stake? Because we have this election coming up. What happens if it goes the other direction? Because some of this success has made his job easier, but we are starting to see some of these people on the stage saying some things that would make his life a lot more difficult. So we're going to talk about some of the challenges, because you've been talking about how we're going to have to gear up for this next election. That's right. That's going to be important. So as we go to a break, this is a perfect time to call, because it's a lengthy time for you to give us a call, because I know you don't want to miss anything that Jeremy's going to have to say. 800-347-5151. Or, of course, you can simply go to the website, pointofview.net, and listen and make your pledge, because we are asking you for your participation. 100% participation. We'll let you decide what that amount is. 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled. We'll talk about some of the challenges right after this.
When I turn on the news, there are days I wonder what's happened to our nation. So many things seem to be turned on their head. It makes you wonder, what can be done about it? Then I remember how Jesus talked about the power of truth and how it can set people free. We know the truth, and when it's spoken in love, it has the power to bring healing to our divided world. 2 Timothy reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Is it possible in our day and age to once again see civil debate, common sense, and national unity? It seems very clear from 2 Timothy that we are to be bold, not fearful, to appreciate God's power to do good, and to demonstrate to the world His truth and love. But to communicate this to a broken world, they need you to join our team. Join the Truth Team. Your monthly support has the power to turn our nation back to real truth. Join the Truth Team today at pointofview.net/team. or by calling 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net/team or 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, last half hour, and we have a match on the table. So again, we have in studio with us Jeremy Dice as well as Brad Fisk, and we've brought in Warren Kelly, who is the president of Point of View, just to help us understand exactly where we are in meeting this match and why people need to support Point of View.
Yeah, little discouraged here, a little concerned that we're hearing from so few of you. Kerby, you and I were in Alaska a few weeks ago. We were up visiting our good friends at KJNP at the North Pole, and got to visit with some of our listeners up there. It was really encouraging to hear. We had one man tell us that you're his primary source for news and information. Had a couple of others that told us that this is where they turn because they want to make sense about what's happening in the news because there's so much bias and so much spin. You're trying to figure out what's right. I've heard that over and over and over, and I know there are people out there that just love the show, love Kerby, but I'm seeing something I have never seen before. I've never said this on air because I've never actually seen it before. I'm seeing discouragement in Kerby's face. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people listening to me talk right now. And we had 20 people call today. Actually, less than 20 people. And I don't want to be berating anybody. There are some that can't give. I know that you can't. But this, the battlefield we're on is not a friendly place. And it's so encouraging, I know, to Kerby, when we hear from people, every single one of you is important to us. You have no idea how much your gifts mean to us and how much we actually pay attention to those. So let's let Kerby know you're with him, Let's let him know that he's got people standing with him in the fight, that you're going to help and you're going to be there. Whatever you can give. If you can't give $50 a month, give $20 a month. If you can't give monthly, give one time. But just let us know you're out there. I know it's times that I've heard from Kerby, I've heard from Marlon before him, I've heard from the others. You sit in this room and you see the guy across the table, you see a couple of staff members back in the booth, and you actually wonder, is anybody out there actually listening? Because you don't get to ever see the people. So today, he needs to see you. And the only way to do that is to make the phones ring. So give us a call.
Phone number, 800-347-5151. That's toll free, 800-347-5151. Or you can give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net.
Well, again, we want to spend a little bit of time talking with Jeremy. And, of course, we've talked about winning in some of the successes. And before we get into the negative, let's also talk about 150 federal judges, more than 150, but I'll just use the 150 number because it came out the other day when we had Kelly Shackelford in studio. 105 federal court judges actually confirmed, 43 circuit court judges confirmed, 2 Supreme Court judges confirmed. These are people that believe in the Constitution and use what's called an original interpretation of the Constitution. They want to try to understand the original intent. That's going to make your job a whole lot easier, isn't it?
Oh, my gracious, yes. When you have people that understand what the words that are written on the page of the Constitution, it makes a whole difference to the litigation that is out there. In fact, I've been in front of the same court that did the immigration ban, the Trump versus Hawaii ban, the same judge that invalidated that program. We had to go before of and spend a lot of time explaining the law here that was important to a Jewish synagogue, as a matter of fact. So it was a difficult case, but it was made more difficult because we had to do a lot of education efforts to explain that there are some first principles here that are needed to be understood. But anywhere we go, look, I've said this before, the Supreme Court hears about, last year I think they heard 69 cases or something like that at the court. They had 10,000 appeals, somewhere in that range. There were 43,000 or so decisions by the circuit courts, the next layer down from the Supreme Court. That was over like 500,000 appeals that went there because there's 500,000 or more decisions or cases filed within the federal district courts in the United States. So the point is, you have a better chance of having your civil rights resolved at the district court level than you do at the Supreme Court of the United States.
Right.
And so that we have 105 different judges that have been appointed to those benches. That you've got 40 some odd more that have been put on the second layer of those benches. And then those important 2 people, Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh, that are on the Supreme Court of the United States. I mean, that is an enormous impact upon the federal judiciary. We're at the point right now. Now, think about this. We're at the point right now where we are just about a few seats away from establishing at least parity on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, no one ever thought that would be possible with, 28 judges or 27 judges that are on that panel that governs almost the entire West Coast plus Montana and all the rest. That's a huge deal for that for the decisions that come out of there. And then go on down the line. The other thing I'll point out, too, some of those judges that have been appointed, I was just with a number of them actually down at a conference in Austin here recently. They're former employees of First Liberty Institute. They're former volunteer attorneys with First Liberty Institute. So the president is nominating some really high-quality people to be going on those positions, and they're there for life. They're not going to leave unless they've committed some sort of high crime and misdemeanor, which I doubt any of them are going to do that. But these are people that have not only thought through what the Constitution means, they have fought for the Constitution within their not only their private practices, but in their gratis time, their free time. They've decided in the evening time, after doing all the paid-for work, to go out and for free defend religious liberty across this country. And now they're on the federal bench. That's huge.
One of the things Brad's talked about is we're probably going to need a war chest because of what happens in this election. I know you had to go through that at First Liberty in terms of actually vetting some of those judges. But what happens if it goes the other direction? What if one of those candidates we've seen on the stage there becomes the next president of the United States and defeats Donald Trump? What happens then?
Well, you got the list, Kirby. I mean, there's an entire list of things that they've already promised about what they're going to provide for you. And I mean, it seems like it's everything from free health care to socks and underwear for all Americans. I mean, it's an incredible amount of stuff that the left is promising us here. You know, it's remarkable that they'd be able to provide all these things. But on top of all that, the judicial picks there would be wretched. You know, I think the controversy in the last couple of days is very illustrative of this point, that we've got, again, going over Justice Kavanaugh. That poor man and his family, they can't get away from it all. Well, the point of this whole thing is not to further drag Kavanaugh through the mud as if that name could get any dirtier in the mind of the left. They fear a Supreme Court and any judge that is willing to be bound by that Constitution. And they fear a Supreme Court that they cannot manipulate through the political processes. And that is why, sensing that there may be more appointments coming to the Supreme Court now or in the next 4 or 5 years, that they are doing everything they possibly can to either pack that court with leftists that would be there for life to ensure that their left-leaning ideology is there, to be able to use them as a second branch of a second political branch to accomplish what they can't accomplish in the legislature, they'll do on the bench. All these things are now fair game. So it's very important that election, we think through that very well. And there's really no better place to think through these issues than by talking about it around this table at Point of View.
So again, we've talked about this war chest, but Warren, we still need to pay the bills first, right?
Yeah, I mentioned before that I have never done this before. I've actually kind of crawled out on a limb here because I got to thinking if I tell people, call so that Kerby knows somebody's listening and you don't call, that's really going to be bad. And I'm still seeing empty phone lines. So let us hear from you. Your gift really does make a difference. It changes lives and it changes the course of the country. And we've still got $8,000 left on an $11,000 match that has been going for the whole show here. And we're almost to the end. So if you've been waiting for that last minute to kind of help push us over the top, now would be a good time to come and help push us over the top.
And we could have actually let's ask for 7 Century Club members joining at $100 a month. We would chip away at that almost to zero immediately. So just 5 or 6 people giving $100 a month or more, and we put those together, and we'll be at the match. And all $11,000 will go into our total.
Well, we've got a lot more to cover, and we certainly will do so, but we need you to respond. And let me just also suggest that, as we've talked about, some of you at the higher level, some of you may be new donors. You've never actually given to Point of View. Warren, there's a few of those out there, aren't there?
More than a few.
We always say there's about 1% that give to Point of View, but really it's about 1/3%, really, isn't it?
And there have been times that I've actually taken people. I know people who have listened to the show. They love the show. The show's made a big difference in their life. And I know they haven't given to the show. So I take them to lunch, and I sit across the table and say, look, I just want to know why, because what are we doing wrong? And they look at me with this kind of a blank stare and say, I never thought about it. And I get, it's this, I guess you never asked. This, well, I'm asking right now. Please pick up the phone and call us. We need to hear from you. We count on you. We rely on you to continue to do what Kerby's doing right here every day. Jeremy, the voice that he has to be able to come to the table. But, Point of View played a role in him becoming what he is. That he listened when he was a young boy. Your gifts really do make a difference. Really, really do make a difference. Let us hear from you today.
800-347-5151. Let's fill every single line this break. 800-347-5151. 5151. You can also give online at pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. Give us a call. Every dollar doubled up to $8,000 right now. 800-347-5151.
Or you can go to pointofview.net. Either way, 800-347-5151. Every dollar doubled.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. This is the third in a series of episodes exploring the impact of the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. In this episode, we turn to the issue of hostility toward religion. It's clear that the justices wish to respect the presence of the memorial and what it has come to mean for the people of Bladensburg, Maryland. Though opponents of the memorial clamored for neutrality, removing the Peace Cross would not be a neutral act by the government. As the majority explained, quote, requiring their removal would not be viewed by many as a neutral act, unquote, and it would be seen by many as profoundly disrespectful. Worse, the court's majority observed, a campaign to obliterate items with religious associations may evidence hostility to religion even if those religious associations are no longer in the forefront. In our next episode, we will look at that last part and the evolution of this particular religious symbol into what it means today, but don't miss this critical point. The justices of the Supreme Court are communicating to the nation that genuine neutrality toward religion means respecting religiously expressive monuments, symbols, and practices, not destroying, altering, or hiding them. As Justice Alito explained in his majority opinion, a government that roams the land, tearing down monuments with religious symbolism and scrubbing away any reference to the divine will strike many as aggressively hostile to religion. Stay tuned for more. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Hi, I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. I hope you enjoyed this episode of First Liberty Briefing. You can learn more amazing stories about how everyday Americans are standing up and saving religious freedom. Just visit firstliberty.org.
Point of View, Truth Team. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, and of love, and of a sound mind.
Back once again for just a few more minutes. We have a match on the table. We need to hear from you. Brad Fisk with me, as well as Jeremy Dice, and we thought maybe for just a minute I'd put the list on the table. You know, people say, what would this look like? And this is not the full list. I just picked out a few to talk about real quickly. Medicare for all, that's single payer. Green New Deal, free college tuition, forgive student loans, by the way, guaranteed basic income. Of course, some are suggesting that maybe you should get $1,000 a month from the government forever. Living wage, $15 an hour, government daycare, and you would never pay more than a small percentage of that. Abolish ICE, end the Electoral College, voting age to 16, pack the Supreme Court, reparations, comprehensive gun control. And didn't the other day, I think Joe Biden promised that they would cure cancer.
Why not? Just add it to the list. I mean, it's everything else. Goodness. Look, I'm 41. I just turned 41 a few weeks ago. 40 years ago, and it pains me to say that, not quite 40, so 30-some years ago when I was about 11, right? Is that right? And my math, I went to law school to avoid all the math, so forgive me. But look, I was sitting outside of Fort Myers Christian School with my mom in the half-ton van that we owned, listening to Marlon Maddox, Kerby Anderson, and Penny Dexter talk about these issues. Mom and Dad, and I know you're out there. My mom and dad, first I should say thank you for having that station tuned there at WSOR in Fort Myers, turning to that station every weekday as I waited for yet another rehearsal for my sister to get out of. That was very important in my life. But I know there's a mom sitting somewhere right now with her kid in the pickup line at school thinking through these issues. You just heard this entire list. You know that there are monumental things to be decided upon here. There's no guarantee that President Trump becomes President Trump Part 2. There's every reason right now to think that the Democratic debates are going to rule the day for the next couple of years until the election itself. And then the final election between whoever the nominee is and President Trump, if he's the Republican nominee, even that's even up for debate, I suppose, in some circles. How do you think through these things? Do you have a new voter coming online this year in your family? Have you guys sat down to think through about how your faith means something in the election box as well? Mm-hmm. What about that kid who is my son's age, who's 14, and really asking a whole lot of questions? I was on a run with my son the other day, and he asked me this great question that I was glad we had 4 miles to answer. And it was, Dad, is feminism moral? Well, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it at mile 1 so we could think through this entire thing. Let's go back to Genesis 1 and 2 and 3 and figure this whole thing out. And we did. I could do that because I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kerby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of the current significance in our lives. What does the capital T truth mean for us? That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, and I'm just some attorney that got lucky to go to law school and get to this firm and do these things that I've wanted to do since I was in the 8th grade, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penn Dexter and Kerby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
And again, isn't that a great story?
Absolutely great story. And, it really encourages me. It really does. Because Point of View is having an impact on people's lives all the time. And we are excited to have that partnership with those friends out there. You remember, we've been at this for over 40 years, and there's a whole lot of people that gave money to keep this going long before today. And that's the reason we're still here, is because you did give. So we're asking you, if for no other reason, get that picture of that neighborhood kid, of the grandchildren, of your children. Get that in your minds right now. Look them in the face and tell them this is going to make a difference in your life if we do the right thing and support righteous biblical worldview. And that's what you're going to get here every single day on Point of View.
800-347-5151, also pointofview.net. This is somebody signed up online from Nebraska, interestingly enough, taking advantage of the matching grant. Thank you so much for all that you do to keep citizens involved and informed from a biblical worldview. God bless you. And also praying, she said, in this particular case, I think it was a she, that these other states that don't carry Point of View will do so, and praying that eventually we get broadcast on all 50 states. I think we're on 42, if I counted right just the other day, 263 stations. And those are just the actual stations. Then I run into all sorts of people all the time that have been listening to it on our app. That's or right. We're listening to it on the program, maybe on the computer, or actually saw us on YouTube. So, again, just amazing the extent of all of that. And, Jeremy, just before we're out of time, let's just talk about what we can do. First of all, of course, you register to vote. That's the obvious one. But second of all, I think we need to recognize that there is going to be a really contentious election. And it's going to be even more important for us to use biblical discernment to figure out who we vote for, not just as president, but to go all the way down to the bottom of the list. And that is going to be really important because we've learned now that a lot of people said, well, I don't really care who the mayor is. And then we have a mayor subpoena the actual sermons from pastors. We say, I don't need to pay attention to who's on city council. And then we find out, oh, they are actually preventing a church from being built. Or I don't have to worry about the school board because, after all, they will do the right thing. And then they bring in the drag queen situation. So you recognize more than any of us that all the way down the ballot, we have to understand who those individuals are and make wise decisions.
Well, it's our job. I mean, we are the owners of this country as Americans, and so we need to know how to best steward it. And not only is that something that we understand from our Constitution, if you follow Christ, then you understand that God invented this idea of government, and he's given it to us to steward as like we would steward our money and anything else that we hold precious to us. I like to think of Point of View as one of the rudest organizations in the world because we're told that it's not polite to talk about religion and politics in polite society, and you guys do it for 3 hours a day. It's fantastic that you do that. And I was thinking as you're saying all those things to me, Kerby, just a second ago, there are moms and dads listening to the show right now that go, I've got to talk about these things with my kids. And I mean, just the weight that just drops on their shoulders. I've got to make sure they're on time to ballet practice and cross-country meets. And I've got to tell them more about what it means to think through these issues of the day. And I don't quite understand them myself. And I'm going to get that hard question from my 13-year-old again in the kind of that snotty attitude that he's got. I don't know how to do it. Right. And now you're telling me I got to sit down at the dinner table and talk about these things? That's really, really hard to do. Look, that's why Point of View is here, is to help you think through these issues. We want you to be equipped at Point of View to be able to think not only culturally what's going on in the culture, what they're thinking about, and not from a conservative ideological perspective, but what does capital T truth bring to bear on the discussion of the day to day? So Point of View, in my mind, has always been about helping mom and dad have that time at dinner time to be equipped to have that conversation with their kids across the table. Yeah, go register to vote, go do your votes, that sort of thing. But I'm telling you what, freedom transfers in this country from one generation to the next around the dinner table more than anywhere else in this world. And you and mom and dad need to be equipped to be able to do that. This is where it starts.
Wow. Listen, if you believe anything he said, which was a lot of it, give us a call, 800-347-5151. We have a little over $7,000 remaining on the match. It'll stay open the rest of the day, so you can go online at pointofview.net and make your gift. You can call right now. We have lines open at 800-347-5151. We got some free gifts. If you'd like to give it that $50 a month level, could we have several of you pick up that Bible, that incredible resource, at $100 a month for the year? We would love to hear from you right now. It's not for us. It's for the kids. It's for the grandkids. It's for others in your neighborhood to hear truth, biblical truth. 800-347-5151. 800-347-5151. 5151.
We're talking to the few of you that have been listening but have not responded, so we want to hear from you right now. Let me just give you a program note that we're going to be hearing from Gary Bauer later in the week. We're going to be hearing from Jim Dennison. We're going to be hearing from Mary DeMuth and Noel Boucher. We got all sorts of people that we're hearing from. And Jeremy, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for not only having me here, but for talking to me so many years ago.
Yes. Yep. Well, let's again, one more time. We're going to be off the air in just a minute, but we'll still answer those phones. So that number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151, pointofview.net. Every dollar doubled. And Andrew and Steve, thank you for your help. We are looking forward to seeing you tomorrow right here on Point of View.
This week, we're celebrating the power of one. The power each one of us has to help change our world. The power to carry the love of Christ and His truth to a hurting world. The power to restore hearts and minds across the nation. Throughout the week, you'll hear from ordinary people just like you. You'll hear them tell about what they've done, how they've gotten involved, how they've helped to restore truth in our culture. You have the power to change lives. You have the power to carry truth to every corner of our nation. And with the help of a special ministry friend, that power is going to be doubled. Join the Truth Team today and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. If you join today with a monthly gift, each gift you give will be matched dollar for dollar for an entire year. Give online by going to pointofview.net and click on the Truth Team banner, or call us at 1-800-347-5151. We're standing by to take your call now, so call 1-800-347-5151 or go online to pointofview.net and join the team.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.